It looks like they found the money.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
They being the state Republican Party and or et al. Folks who are interested in referendums, sports betting. When I say they found the money, last time we checked on this saga, the terrific attorney who has been kind of saying, I'm for hire here at a big discount because I want to do the public's work, but I also need to get paid for it. I think we ought to sue the state over the constitutional miscue over starting sports betting without a referendum. I need a customer. And then we had Brandon Bell, the former chairman of the Republican Party, who I think when he was here was still hanging out as one. Not sure. Yes, right? Okay. Boasting over the idea that they had about $20,000+ in a checking account when I said he didn't have a pot to you-know-what in. One way or the other, Attorney Joe Larisa has a client, and we're going to find out exactly how this whole thing is going. This is going to be really a fascinating case, and I think it's going to have a whole lot more traction than some of you who think would think. Now, before, I just want to touch base on this story and the conversation with Hasbro here, which we have been talking about over the last couple of nights. This is the Worcester Business Journal that got into, the headline is bigger than the narrative, which is something that you have to be careful of, right? The building that they've got there is what's proposed next to the new proposed stadium up in Worcester to house the Paw Sox. Amidst all of this rigmarole on Hasbro's future, whether it's going to stay in Pawtucket, whether it's going to be in Providence, or whether it's going to move to the Commonwealth, because rumors are that Massachusetts, the Commonwealth, have been working really hard, or I guess that's a singular, the Commonwealth has been working very hard to get Hasbro across state lines. Worcester reportedly has sent a communication or two indicating their openness to wanting to recruit Hasbro. It seems that that's about the extent of it, but it was a little bit of a flurry after this back and forth over the last couple of days with the governor suggesting that the mayor of Pawtucket criticized Hasbro in a press conference the day after the election when he did not. She made that up. I told you that 2 nights ago. I told you that last night. A terrible response by her office back and forth as no one wants to own up to who's trying to throw who under the bus. I think we've got a little bit of a pre-game scapegoating here from the governor. If Hasbro jumps ship from Pawtucket, it's going to be the mayor's fault. Shouldn't be. Didn't do anything wrong. If Hasbro leaves Rhode Island, it's really going to be the mayor's fault. Shouldn't be. Didn't do anything wrong. The city of Worcester put out a statement saying they are not formally pursuing Hasbro, nor has any city employee had any direct contact with Hasbro. And they say that, you know, they're kind of talking to the state saying, hey, listen, if you hook up with Hasbro, you know, we're open to trying to put some whiz-bang deal together next to the stadium. So that is the update on that. When the white smoke or the black smoke comes out of Pawtucket for Hasbro and their future plans, we'll let you know. In the meantime, this was an op-ed piece that caused a stir. And frankly, it read making quite a lot of sense. We've wondered if it would ever turn into any action. Here's a headline today from today's press conference. There you have it. The former GOP chairman is suing. He is the customer. And now we have this. It's called a lawsuit. And we're off and running. We're suing over illegal sports betting in Rhode Island. And it's a really interesting case. Joe Larisa is no stranger to these gaming issues. He was right a decade ago. We'll see if he's right this time. Former mayor of East Providence. Good to see you. I like to pump him up because it just says attorney underneath him, and you know the guy's been around for crying out loud. Brandon Bell's got 16 different formers. You know, inmate's not one of them, but he's working on it. Oh, just the whole, that's terrible.
That's the Democrats.
That's a 15-yard penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct. Welcome, guys. Good to see you. Very serious issue. The Constitution is a very serious issue. I want to get to the legal arguments in a second, but let's talk about who is the customer. Who is the customer here?
The customer is Dr. Daniel Harrop. Dan Harrop stepped up to the plate, knew that we were looking to challenge this good government issue, which I think is a really important issue when it deals with constitutionality. And Dr. Harrop stepped up to the plate.
Former mayoral candidate in Providence.
Correct.
Yeah.
The party is not the Republican Party is not a party to the complaint.
But you were out recruiting.
I was seeing if there's any interest, because I certainly thought about becoming a plaintiff myself in this case, and thought I would use my legal skill in helping Joe out. But it's really his. He's really the master when it comes to this
So
stuff.
he is the exclusive customer here.
Yes, he is.
And Joe, I mean, is there a cap to the investment? I mean, I don't need to talk about how much money you're making here, but I mean, is this the kind of thing that you're confident Mr. Harrop is in all the way to the end in case you had a full-blown trial case on this?
Yes, he is until the end, and yes, we expect this to eventually be decided by the Rhode Island Supreme Court, the same way the Harris Casino was struck down in 2004. But let me clear one thing up. Customer, I must have used the wrong word. He is the client, and he's the only client. And as far as money's concerned, I think I indicated this last time, it's probably 1/10 to 1/1000th of what the other side is going to be spending to defend sports gambling. It's a very small amount. And I indicated that Adler Pollack charged over $40,000 just for the legal opinion that sports betting was constitutional, not even online sports betting. We're talking a small fraction of that. So we're in this for the public interest. Now, Brandon's role in this is he's co-counsel with me. So he and I are both the attorneys for the client, Mr. Harrop. The Republican Party supports us. In fact, I think the Libertarian Party does. Pat Ford, I was on his show, very strongly believes the Constitution's violated here. We invite Democrats who believe in good government and constitutional government to support us. So this is a good government issue, not a unique GOP issue. And Brandon and I are co-counsel, and our client is Dan Harrop. And he's in this for the long haul, and we want an answer to declare sports betting and online sports betting unconstitutional so that the people, not the politicians, have the last say on this issue.
All right, we're going to talk about the legal arguments, which I think are plain and legitimate. But let's talk about the politic branding in this whole thing. I'm guessing the courts really don't pay much attention to that. The plaintiff is the plaintiff, the client is the client, the argument is the argument. But the spin on all of this is going to be that there's, especially those who enjoy the sports betting and don't pay much attention to details like constitutional issues and like, that this is a gadfly reach by politicians and/or politically interested people who are looking to make their mark. Response to that?
I think the courts take judicial notice, judges take judicial notice of the fact that government is not efficient in many respects in Rhode Island, and not just on the economy side, but on the good government side. Everything from line item veto to ethics reform to all of these issues. This is no different, in my view. This is my personal opinion, is that when you disregard the Constitution, that's the governing document. That's the document that that we live by, and it's supreme over our statutory law. It's supreme over what the legislature passes, and some of these horrible bills that they're passing. I wish some of those could be deemed to be unconstitutional if they're going to go into law, like the Evergreen and the firefighter overtime. So I really think this is a good government issue. I think the judiciary can't consider the fact that they're good government issues. They have to look at the law. And I think we have very, very strong arguments here.
All right, here's what we're going to do. Joe Larisa will lay out these arguments pretty clearly, because it really isn't that complicated. And I think there might be a few of you on the couch who are saying, is it in the Constitution that we can't have sports betting? No. No. We'll explain when we come back. Stay with us.
I think I spoke with the governor's office, told them what I was looking to do as far as just sports betting, not internet gaming at the time, because I am of the opinion that internet gaming would require a referendum because it is an expansion of gaming.
That was in May of 2018, and then later in the fall, the Senate president, who you just saw, had a different thought. Now, is that a referendum issue? Because mobile gaming then becomes a whole... you and I are going to really battle on that one. I mean, does that require a different process or just a piece of legislation?
I don't believe so, because I believe sports gaming...
Well, didn't you tell me that last time that you thought the mobile would require a referendum?
I thought some people were saying that. I mean, they were saying that about sports gaming.
Okay, well, that's a little bit of confusion on the part of the Senate President back in 2018 when this whole thing was moving. Joe Larisa is the lead counsel, Brandon Bell co-counsel, former GOP chairman. There's a single client that is now funding the litigation against the state of Rhode Island on the constitutionality of sports betting. Let's establish a couple of things. Philosophically, thought on sports betting?
As I said last time, I'm agnostic. I don't know how I would vote, and it really doesn't matter. I just want to vote. I want the people to vote.
Brandon?
I probably would vote for it, at least in the form of last year's form. I'm a little concerned with the online for a variety of reasons. I don't want to be, I don't want kids to have a hold of it. I don't want to be sitting in a courtroom gambling myself on games.
Right. So we've got a very interesting development here. I'm not suggesting that we laid an egg with Twin Rivers Sports Gaming. Full disclosure, I have taken some paid endorsement revenue on the radio side to when I read ads at length, I am compensated for it. I was clear with the State Lottery Commission and Twin River that I would still dutifully cover this issue. I'd be happy because I don't have a philosophical problem with sports betting. I had a little bit of a squeamish thing, and I don't do a lot of it. So, in fact, I think I've placed 3 bets since they opened up, all around the Super Bowl or the college football games. But if people want to do this, it's fine. It's all over the place, and it's not the worst sin in the world. I like to bet the Derby, so I'm not an anti-gaming guy at all. But I said to those guys at the beginning, you're in the spring session of 2018. Put up a referendum in the fall because your timing is such that you were looking at January of 19 anyway. And they vehemently argued that they didn't have to do that. Wouldn't have that been nice?
Very easy to do, and they would have had the referendum, probably would have passed, and it wouldn't have delayed it one day. Or they could have asked the Supreme Court for an advisory opinion like we did in the Harris case. Very easy to do. Supreme Court asked in April or May, answer in July or August. If they're right, no question, everybody's fine. If they're wrong, it goes on the ballot. Sounds too logical, Dan.
I want to go back to the Harris case and your good work a decade ago. Time flies. We don't look any different, do we? 10 years later from those conversations. But simply, the argument is that there is no protection, there is no notification or mention in the Constitution that this would be legal. Frame it a better way. Tell me exactly what the Constitution does and does not say, and why a referendum would have been, and you still think is necessary for us to engage in taxpayer-funded sports gaming.
Unfortunately, some people always say expansion of gambling requires voter approval. That's not exactly correct. It's even stricter than that. Expansion of gambling in the form of new types or particular forms, those words are in the Constitution, require the voters approve any legislation by the General Assembly, new types and particular forms. The state says, oh, we did that in 2012 and 2016 when we approved table games and we approved video lotteries in Tiverton. Well, those new types and particular forms were actually on the ballot and they were defined, video lotteries and table games. Sports betting wasn't on either of those questions.
Well, no. There's a Class 3. Class 3 umbrella that is in the...
Includes sports betting, sure.
The Constitution, right? What does the Constitution say about Class 3?
Nothing. It's not in the Constitution. The Constitution says new types. Class 3, let's look at that for a minute. Class 3, is that a type? No, it's a class. It says it's a class. It's a class that includes all types of casino
What is
gambling.
Class 1 and 2?
Class 1 and 2. Class 1 are ritualistic Indian games that are played on Indian lands. Class 2 is bingo. Class 3, get this, the definition, which wasn't in the voter information book or on the ballot, is everything that's not Class 1 and Class 2. So when the question is asked, the people voted on this, and my question to the court's going to be on the other side is how? How did they know sports betting was on the ballot? There's no way to know.
No, there's no possible. Listen, that's inarguable.
Then the case is over.
It was illegal.
It was illegal.
It was illegal.
Right.
There was no notification. There was no term known as sports betting. Nobody ever approved it. The General Assembly took it upon themselves to interpret that they had cover by this Class 3 designation.
In fact, Dan, it's even worse than that. People, the average voter, which is who you have to look to in Rhode Island on what was on the ballot, if they were asked, was sports betting on the ballot, and they knew the laws, they're absolutely not on the ballot because it was illegal. So they would have known it was not on the ballot. Not that it was on the ballot, because it wasn't played anywhere in the 50 states outside of Nevada. No casinos at sports betting.
Got it? We're going to review the Harris case and what Joe was able to accomplish there when we come back. But the question remains, I think, for everybody. Whatever, if everyone's probably going to approve it anyway, why do we have to go through all this rigmarole? You know? What are you going to do? We'll be right back. The Tiverton Sportsbook, which is very nice, but has not perhaps earned the budget that we're looking for. In fact, it didn't at all. It hasn't yet. Doesn't mean it can't. I really don't know what the ebb and flow is. The Patriots sucked all the money out of the Super Bowl and really hurt the revenues and the launch for sports gaming here in the state, which only accelerated the legislature's desire, and the governor too, who's hooked on this idea, to expand to here, to the phone. And that's probably coming the fall. We've had some expertise here that says, you know what, this is a whole different ball game, literally, all pun intended. You go up to Twin River and you make some bets, that's one thing, that's a purposeful trip, you have to make it. This is different. It's high risk behavior. We haven't put enough money in the budget to cover the problem gambling that will inevitably occur with this. But again, I'm not arguing the philosophy here, just the practicalities. They're rushing to the phone because the revenues just haven't made made budget. But here's the thing, Joe. If in fact, well, check that. If most likely the people of this state will shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, sports betting's fine, and vote yes on it, what's the big deal? What's the big deal that a referendum wasn't used for it to happen, because likely it's going to pass anyway?
Well, you've heard the story of the bad guys coming after Group X and nobody cares, and it's not us. Then they come after Group Y and nobody cares about Group X, it's not Y. And then finally they come after you. And oh my gosh, there's nobody left to defend me. It's the same thing here, Dan. If one provision of the Constitution is completely ignored and viewed as if it doesn't exist, then every provision of the Constitution is in jeopardy. And that's all we have to gain here. You talk about, well, why is this happening? Well, the other side has tens of millions of dollars of vested interest in pushing this forward. Brandon and I and Dr. Harrop have nothing. There's only one reason we're here. Our ulterior motive is good government and defending a provision of the Constitution. So we want this provision defended so that all other provisions of the Constitution can be defended. And we say, well, we already know what's going to happen. Well, one, online sports betting is different than sports betting by going to the casino. And two, that opens up a virtual casino. Every game in the state's view could now be done by the legislature. Go on your iPhone and be paid 24/7.
A new app to play blackjack would be legitimized
poker,
through this.
Everything.
Because you're saying that the sports betting was not treated uniquely, it was treated as Class 3.
Yes.
So just like the blackjack and poker tables, so there is no prohibition to go here to play blackjack or anything else that you're going to play.
And your basic question about, why a referendum if it's going to pass anyway, to educate the voters. That's the whole point. And we all saw what happened in 2006, on the casino gaming. Let's educate the voters. Maybe there are groups out there that'll explain why people should vote against it. Right now they might think, okay, I'm going to vote for it, no problem. I personally I'm agnostic as to as well.
Remind us what the Harris argument was about 10 years ago, which you won again against many in the mainstream who really thought that you were barking up the wrong tree.
They thought it was a frivolous suit until we won, and then everybody said, oh, that's so clear. Of course a casino is a lottery. Larisa was holding this till the last minute.
Go back to the original premise.
The original premise was that you can't have private casinos in Rhode Island. Harris, of course, is a private casino. The only lotteries you can have under the Constitution are state operated. And the Harris Casino, 80% of the revenue of which is slot machines. Slot machine is nothing more than a lottery, and the case law is very clear on that. It's all chance.
Well, it's really, what people don't
prize.
know, it's kind of like a trick question for everybody, is that still Twin River to this
Yes.
day, is the custodian of the VLTs.
Yes.
The state lottery, if you look at your ticket on a VLT, I've played it maybe 3 or 4 times, it's a lottery ticket.
Yes.
And Twin River is commissioned to facilitate the game. It is not Twin River's game.
And,
It's
and all
all-
the money is the state's. All the money comes into the state, and they get a percentage of it.
Right. It's a different formula for in terms of percentage for the table games and the like,
Yes.
but still sanctioned by the state. The sports betting is run through the lottery.
Yes.
It's still
State operated.
State operated. So that's the difference between what was proposed with Harrah's and what's proposed here.
Correct.
It's semantics to most people, but in a legal world, it's all on the money here. This feels a little like David and Goliath, the sequel, because you were Goliath in this argument a decade ago, and prevared. Are
I was
you?
David a decade
David-
ago.
I mean, David, not Goliath. He
ended up being
was
Goliath.
David. He's a big guy, but he wasn't Goliath.
No.
You were David. You were
Yes.
David slinging against Goliath,
Yes.
and do you feel as powerful as a David this time around?
It's powerful. I think we absolutely are a David. We've got, like I said, 10 to 100 times the lawyers and the money going against us.
All those big-time lawyers,
Oh,
including
big.
Adler Pollack, who facilitated a decision for the legislature to legitimize this, John Tarantino and others, he's a phenomenal lawyer. He can argue both sides of a case. It's like cha-ching, cha-ching. You know that old adage, only the lawyers win? Well, only the lawyers do win. I mean, all the big-time entities now are going to be billing copious amounts of hours to defend. They think you're the greatest thing since
I'm going
sliced
to get a
bread.
fruit basket for Christmas, I hope, Dan, this year.
I
with
want an
all the
apple
other
pie.
stuff.
I was like apple pie.
We'll get
You're going to
an
make
apple
this
pie.
much.
Yes,
And they're going to make this much.
correct. We're not doing this for the money.
Where does this go? Does this settle out? The legislature says, Uncle, by the way, important, do you think your effort here will cause an interruption in the sports gaming operation? Or will it be argued continuously while it runs?
But we're going to get a decision before next November, that's for sure. We're hoping for one soon, and then the
But do you
Supreme
want an
Court.
injunction against the operation?
They're not supposed to have any sports betting, never mind mobile, unless
Do
the
you
people
think there'll
vote
be a
for it.
preliminary judgment by a court to say suspend operations while we adjudicate this?
Either a preliminary or final one by the Supreme Court long before next November, till they put it on the ballot.
What's the chances of getting preliminary before the final?
Well, we're going to talk to the judge and see. We may be able to expedite this and just have. There's no factual questions here. Just have briefing and
I
a
would think
decision.
I would think the
Declaratory
Supreme
judgment.
Court would hustle on this. I mean, they are cognizant of the public interest in this conversation. All right, troublemakers or good government people?
Or
Good
both.
government.
A little of both.
Yeah, I was a
You know what?
troublemaker. I'm now
Hey,
good
co-counsel,
government.
you guys better get your stories straight. Fascinating case, and we'll follow it as we go. Final word when we come back. Stay with us. All righty, listen, this lawsuit, I take no pleasure in this other than the I told you so stuff. Now look, it hasn't been adjudicated. The Supreme Court closes its eyes and never looks at a law book. They will probably say, you know what? We already did this. We're good. But I think Joe Larisa's arguments in this are clear, concise, and simple. And I told you back in 18, we could have cleared this mess up before it started. But the General Assembly and the governor just wanted to go. We'll see. Talk to you on the radio at 3 tomorrow on WPRO. Good night.